I'm going to introduce our speaker. And when I say our speaker, he's actually a really good friend, and we've become friends, and we've actually started working together, and I've roped him into rock. You know, guess what? If you don't want to be roped into rock, you better leave this call now, because I'll have you if you're available. Anyway, Matt Eason from Ashford in Kent. He has 10 years at least and counting working experience with community development, working with central, local government and civic service providers, charities and churches. And this is the mission statement of Matt Eason: to build lasting and impactful community development initiatives. How good is that? So I can't think of a better person to speak to us now for 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, and then we've got a time of Q&A. So do jot your questions down as Matt is speaking. Over to you, Matt. Bless you.
Thank you so much. Right, let me just get my screen up so we can do a sharing. Right, and we'll hopefully, if I can get this, move this down, we can then do the, so it's going to move around. Sorry about this, folks. It's always the way. We think you want things to work.
We can see it.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
I was just going to do the animation. Doesn't matter. Anyway, look. Just a very warm thank you. Deborah and I, we have been friends for quite a while, and we met at a conference, and it was, as I like to say to some people, I was her chauffeur, which was basically I picked her up from the train station, and I think we got lost in different ways before we got to the conference, and vice versa. And it was like, oh, we're just like long lost friends. And it was suddenly we realized that there could be something. And so I am, and with great privilege and excitement, working alongside with Deborah and the Rock family, looking to do some absolutely revolutionary things. So as Deborah just mentioned very briefly, my background is community development. I'm a social action community development specialist. Actually, commercially, I'm a marketeer. But if you cut me in half, I'm all about helping and enabling people to thrive. And with that, I have worked with central government, with the Cabinet Office, with DWP, with local authorities, with dioceses, with churches. Previous to in the playing ground of Rock, I have been an advisor with the Cinnamon Network. So I do a lot, have done literally for about 5 years or so, about mentoring and coaching around about 600 different churches in what does it look like to have a big impact and create good outcomes in the lives of the communities that they're connected to. So just to give you a quick précis in what we're going to cover in a very, very short space of time, please make notes. And I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible, but hopefully as attainable as possible. So as you can see here, we will go with what is mental health deterioration, the components to it, how do we build it, what's the real impact in it, and that is the downside, as I like to call it. Then we will be looking at things that are helpful, and then we've got a couple of questions which you can then start to populate your discussions in the workout groups. So let's go to the next thing. Mental health, we know it is something that is it has been amplified and most recently during pandemic and post-pandemic. I think we are in an unprecedented time where people talking about mental health, it's more so. I do youth work on a part-time basis, and when we start talking about mental health, if we were to have that 10 years ago, you get a lot of scratching of heads and going, not sure. Now that young people particularly, and obviously now with adults as well, it is something that's on their fiscal vision. Okay, but when asked what does it look like, this is a very quick and dirty, 6 examples. Now I say examples because this is not by any means an exhausted list. But usually when someone's wellness and peace is disrupted, there are certain things that you'll see. They're not sleeping very well. They will have mood swings towards themselves and those around them. they're just not very happy. Okay. Sometimes they will have a change of appetite, what they eat, drink, or eat too much or drink too much. And then there's these worse behaviors, physical symptoms as a consequence to that. And you've got low energy and anxiety. Those are examples of it. Okay. I wanted to say that because for me, it's important that we start on a baseline. The thing that's interesting with mental health, and it's quite helpful that we just do it all in once so we can get through this as quickly as possible. The components to mental health deterioration is one of them is loneliness and isolation. And we've seen this across the board. People feel lonely, even when they're in relationships, okay? Or they've moved somewhere, they don't know their neighbor, or they feel isolated from their family and friends. Another component to that is actually, and it's not the only one, but it is a influence, is their income. Okay, so how much money they'd have or don't have, where it's coming from, how much they need to spend, and so on and so forth. And then the third component, which is also very important to mention, is our relationships with our past, present, and future. What happened in the past? Where do we feel where we are right now? And what's the prospects of a positive future or not? All of these components, being isolated, how we are surviving, and how we feel from things that have happened to us that are happening to the past, present, and future, actually impact our wellness. When I was working with the Cabinet Office, it became very apparent through the discussions that there was a lot of focus around people with lower social economic status. But when I started to do research, it became very, very abundant that problematic addictions, relationship breakdowns, depression, so on and so forth, domestic violence, etc., was happening across the social economic status. Layman's talk, but you know what I mean. But the upper, middle, and lower classes, all tiers of society are impacted by mental health. Nobody is exempt. Okay. I used to run a YMCA, and one of the things that we found when we were working with the young people was that there were certain things that helped them, let's say, turn the ship around from being quite difficult individuals to be really amazing citizens. And it was these two things: having the right type of people around you with something that inspires you, that leads to positive, thriving well-being. Now, a lot of this, weirdly enough, is actually is social prescribing. But I can guarantee you, if I was to ask any one of you whether or not, can you name a person in your life who had a positive influence that was formative to who you are today? Every single person needs one of those people. Constructive use of time is really something that gives you, inspires you. Combined, they create the components, the unspoken components, which I won't go into today, which then leads to thriving outcomes. I've put it down here as just as a side comment, is the whole thing of reframing our past. It's important to talk about the things that trouble us, but to keep giving new perspective to it. If we keep telling the same story over and over again, we get PTSD. But if we address a situation and look at it from a different perspective, PTSD disappears. And this is from war veterans and so on and so forth. Okay. This is something that please make notes on. This is very, very important. So this is from discussions from some friends that Deborah and I have at Beachy Head and with the health service in Sussex. 2008, 2009, there was an economic crisis, and they saw in 3 years' time an increase in self-harming and suicides. Okay, that is a helpful canary for us to look at where we are today. All right. So self-harming and other increases in health deterioration, increase in crime, unemployment increased, and relationships. We'll look at that little box in a minute on the right-hand side, which is important. for most of you, and I was one of those individuals, I had no idea that the cost of suicide to the public purse, once a person has committed suicide, is actually £1.6 million per person. Self-harming costs to deal with someone who's done some self-harming, it costs the public purse £30,000. Can I just say this as a thing? My brother-in-law committed suicide about 6 years ago. I had another dear friend of ours, a family friend, who committed suicide and I know what it looks like. I know the story of the things that happened to it. And I don't take this subject in any way lightly. It is something that is the worst case scenario, but there are a number of different phases that happen before then where hopelessness is more prevalent than we realize. Now, the current interventions, many of them at the moment are what I call sandbags. It's just before things get worse, just before things get worse, as opposed to building the seawalls that are ready for when the big storms happen, okay? This is reality. I'm working across the country, talking to different local authorities, and this is the consistent thing. It's sandbags, not seawalls, that seem to be the interventions. This is by no means a criticism, because the reality is local authorities and programs are overworked and underfunded, okay? But, and this is important, let's just give a very quick laser focus. I've put Huddersfield, or Kirklees as they're titled, of their population of almost 500,000, you'll see 49 suicides happened last year. This is all up-to-date things. Some of you might have seen one of these graphs before, or tables before. To the public purse, they are spending £81 million just to deal with the consequence of after a suicide. £20 million has been spent for those who are involved with dealing and supporting those who are victims of self-harming. Okay, violent crimes, that's domestic violence and violent to other people, etc. Again, massive amounts of money. These are all connected to mental health deterioration. We cannot undervalue or undermine the utter impact. Unemployment in Huddersfield, again, not a very big city, they're spending just on job seekers allowance and other bits and pieces, £110 million. All right, people are struggling with money. If you remember that thing at the top, where loneliness and isolation and income are all an influence to people's mental health deterioration. They are, and they're not either. Okay, and sometimes it can be either, but those are significant influences. But there's good news, as always, because it's always important. For, I think, over 80 rock conversations have happened. I think it is. And they are, as far as I'm concerned, the most important thing to happen to a town and city. When I've worked with the Archbishop's Commission on Housing and Community, in a conversation I had with the chair, he had been spoken to by the local authorities and said, we know that you are there, but we don't know where the front door is. The problem is that, and I'm working in central government, from the top to the bottom is uncoordinated. So for me, an up-to-date mapping exercise in a rock conversation isn't just a good idea, it's absolutely necessary. Okay, and I say that because just to encourage you with what you've already done, but also if you've had a rock conversation probably 5 years ago, I promise you it probably needs updating. It just with that, I haven't seen how things move on, funding, how funding flows and how organizations dip, etc. Personnel, etc. So I'm working with Rock, as Deborah said. So I'm doing some bits and pieces there. I'm also working with Waverley, who have just merged with 24/7, and they're actually a college. Now, with my work with Cinnamon, one of the things that's fascinating with all the recommended projects is that the projects themselves are very, very good. But if you ask someone like Trussell Trust, their main objective is to get rid of food banks. Even though there's 1,400, they actually want to get rid of food banks. But to get rid of a food bank or any of these projects, which are so necessary, when a person enters into a program, they come with what I call a backpack full of challenges. And some of those programs only deal with some of them. Chaplaincy is an amazing vital component. Pastoral care is a vital component to supporting individuals to help them from being dependent to independent. Okay. 8 months independent learning you can do to become accredited chaplain. The next thing, and this for us is where Deborah and I are really excited. And this is just, I'm going to smash this as quickly as possible. In Australia, they run an AI program with a town or city. They assess basically the mental health forecast MOT of what is their level of mental health well-being. 10 being suicide, 0 being fantastic. Now that's an MOT. That's very helpful. But the thing that's a game changer is the specific recommendations that they put in place that identify what is needed. Now, I've worked with commissioners and they'll say, well, we've got all this research and we think we need this. This software that we are looking to roll out in different towns and cities will give pinpoint exact things of that is key needed. Now, the interesting thing when they've run this, and every single place, I think I've done it in different 10 locations, and suicides and self-harming has been through the roof. When they've run that program, they've worked with the local action group, the number of suicides has dropped completely. Okay, so if you put that into reflection of, let's say, Huddersfield, where they're spending, I think, £80 million, that's £80 million that they've instantly saved, let alone the thousands of people's lives that we saved from the impact from a person committing suicide. This is such an important thing. And where there's a surplus of cash, what we are looking to do, which is a bonkers idea, but one I think is actually very, very important. And because I know community development programs, very, very acutely, one of the problems is if we talk about sandbags versus sea walls, social action programs are the sea wall, but they are vastly underfunded. So if we can put in the programs that put in the early intervention preventions, there will be a surplus of cash which we can then draw upon from a community chest, a local community chest. That's the plan. And so we're going to different towns and cities saying, hey, are you up for doing something absolutely revolutionary that is a pure example and a pure reflection of what the kingdom of God looks like, which is essentially setting the prisoners free, giving sight to the blind, and helping the people to be to live the best that God has called them to be. So, and again, I've really gone very quickly, and I know that it is. I've got a number of questions, which I hope, and no doubt there'll be lots of questions from this. The first one is, how organized and up to date are you with the action groups and community connections? Okay, such an important thing to just work out, how organized are you? The second thing is, you may have professional pastoral supports. Great. How sufficient are they? Is it enough? If it's not, maybe it's worth considering getting some others to get trained up, whether it be Waverley at the moment seems to be the quickest and cheapest and fully credited form of chaplaincy. It's not the only one, but it's incredibly good. And you get credited with CIC. Then when it comes to the optics of how I've put this question, how do you know exactly what is needed in your community to build well-being? And that's with the software. The software gives you the optics. And then, of course, the last question is, if you could do anything, how much money do you really need? Because you see, all of these optics will give a clear idea of what a win needs and what's a bump in the road. And then you can identify your next steps. Okay. So that's me.
Wow. Wow, I can't write fast enough. We will send you the slides, guys. I'm sure Matt is happy for us to have those, and the links to Waverley chaplaincy programs and the other things that have been asked about. How do we get those statistics? We'll send you all of that through. We've got time for a couple of questions. And I'm aware that people may not want to ask a question in this large group. They may prefer to go into the breakout rooms and discuss that in more detail. But is there anybody who would like to ask a question? Yes. the guys over in Eastbourne. But take yourself off mute, Stephen Lynn Whittington. Oh, you're on mute. Yeah.
We're off. Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. First of all, Matt, thank you so much for what you just said. It's just kind of resonated with our hearts. It's exactly where we've been on a journey in the last 18 months since coming out of the work at Beachy Head, which we were involved with for about 8 years or so on intervention work. I was just interested about the seawalls sandbags. We very much understand the sandbags because that was part of our world for nearly a decade. And we're kind of in a seawall project that we're trying to get organised at the moment. How easy is it for us as a kind of standalone almost to be able to kind of connect with other people to kind of get involved with some of the things you're talking about?
The answer to that question is and it isn't. And what I mean that if you're already in an organized group, then it's very easy to start basically mapping what you've got. If you're not, then it's I think the first place is to really map out your impact and what you're actually doing. Secondly is to work out who holds the portfolio. Now, weirdly enough, Deborah and I are actually speaking with the head of the health service who holds the portfolio for suicide prevention. I know about, Beachy Head being the global #1 spot for suicide. Had an amazing conversation with the folk there. Although most of the people don't come from Sussex, it's a massive influx from around the country. The challenge really is to say, how urgent do we need to do this? And so that stat that I gave around the 3 years actually came from the Sussex Health chap. And look, I think in the next 2 to 3 years, I'll be perfectly honest with you, if there's ever an urgency for us to take this very, very seriously, it's now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think, certainly we would understand implicitly about the, as I say, the intervention side, and having that kind of lived experience for a long time, want to be able to use that in order to be more supportive within community of either projects that are out there already, or as I say, ours are like, we're a standalone, as I say, at the moment. So it's kind of,
I think sorry to interrupt. I think in all honesty, to answer your question directly, work out whether or not your churches together and your church leadership groups have the right optics. If they don't have the right optics, that's the first thing you need to do. Right. Secondly, you need to work out who are the key partners, so external non-churchy people, and then work out where are the bumps in the road, and then open up a conversation. Always showing what your impacts are, your outcomes. That would be answer to that question. Okay.
Thank you very much, and sorry to take up so much time, but
no, that's fine.
It's brilliant, and we love your project, Stephen Lynn. Well done for what you're doing. I'm going to have one more question. Chris Kluwer, I know you've got a good question.
Hi, Matt. Thank you. We are doing research on community action that's going on across Plymouth at the moment. It strikes me some other data is needed about the needs. What data for this software, this wonderful pinpoint software to work? What data do you need from like the community, apart from what you're doing in there? Surely you need some sort of base level about what needs are, how to measure that, not just suicide numbers.
Yeah. So the data is powered by an AI that is got thousands of peer-led reviews, articles, and what optics and scaffolding that reveal what a person needs. Okay. So to some extent, you don't actually need to do anything other than you need to organize to agree that you want to do it. It's at that point, once you've organized and agreed to do it, that you get it, that you get the funding from the local authorities, which they will save because of the outcomes from it post the running the survey, and then it will give you the clear specifics. I can guarantee you that this sort of measures that you will have, the measures will be universal, but the recommendations will be different. Okay. But I think first and foremost, there has to be a gathering of, we need to tackle this. What I'm doing when I am going to different towns and cities, I'm giving them a graph, that table of just saying, this is how much you're spending. this is the areas, and I can show very specifically. Okay, so violent crimes are really high, unemployment, that's okay. We can see the number of suicides, self-harming, etc. That is enough to actually get you at the table with local authorities to say, we need to do more to create the seawalls rather than the sandbags, because the sandbags, they're going to keep on doing that, and the Lord bless them for it, but it's not going to change the tide. Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm aware that a lot of the language is technical, and a lot of questions coming in about what are optics and the rest of it. We will get that information to you following the call or in the breakout rooms. But I want to go to kind of the opposite end of the spectrum now before we go into breakout rooms in about 5 minutes. And I want to, because many people are thinking, this is just too big. This is just too big. I can't get my head around it right now. It's great the way things start small and then build up. And because Matt has been doing this for 10 years and I've been doing this for like 20 years, we move in these incremental stages, don't we? But I want to start at the beginning. Where does it start? And bring in Andy Bell and Margaret just to give us 2 very quick stories on how, a bit like Pamela's testimony of how people were helped in a practical way and stopped from sort of falling off the edge of the cliff, literally. So Andy, do you want to tell us about Esme, just as an example?
Yes, so this is a lady who took part in our Rock Mentors scheme, which is a one-to-one support really for a main caregiver in a family. So she's a single parent mother with a young son, very much struggling with low self-esteem and anxiety, feeling a little bit overwhelmed with life, and as Matt referred to, feeling quite isolated. So what we do is we provide a mentor, which is a friend with purpose. So we look at various goals that we can achieve in somebody's life together, working with them, looking at what they want to achieve. So in this particular case with Esme, we were looking at helping her get better at cooking, how to bake cakes, looking at tips for good parenting, putting some house rules in place, setting boundaries when she was at work, but also just trying to help her explore what she wanted to achieve. And one of those things was actually she wanted to take up watercolouring. And so that was something that actually the mentor helped her with, really, just to get started on it, really, just encouraging just to have a go. And really that's so helpful, just in terms of something that she really wanted to do. It was her own idea, but also in terms of mental health, just be able to, have time to herself to sort of take things in, not be rushed, not to be worried about things. I think that was really helpful. But also, as they met up, they went for walks as well, which is obviously, as you get outside, that's sort of the positive thing, isn't it? Getting out of the house, really good. In a sense, on a more personal level, the mentor encouraged Esme really not to sort of worry and fret too much about the future, but very much take one day at a time, but also to value herself and and realize how special she is, just herself, and really just affirm her. And I think coming through that, Esme just felt very much cared for on the one hand, but also on the other, knowing that in the mentor, she'd have somebody who could be her rock that she could lean on. And feel empowered by, in those conversations, but also just giving me a confidence in tackling things, making her own decisions, and very much, hopefully achieving some dreams that she's got and in her heart, heart's desires, really, and exploring that. So really, it's been a really good result for her, but just very much somebody coming alongside her and just helping and being a listening ear and encouraging her in the right way.
Yeah, it's that significant person that Matt was talking about that we've all had in our lives at various points, which have just given us that help to walk with them, or they walk with us at that particular time. One more example, Margaret, of somebody who's been helped by having that personal contact and person to help.
Yeah, last week, our first mentoring relationship completed in Lauren, and last night we heard all about it and we were absolutely blown away. This lady, when she started, she was extremely nervous, very low self-esteem, showing signs of anxiety when meeting her mentor for the first time. She was really shaky and really nervous, but her mentor was absolutely brilliant with her, and she encouraged her when she needed encouragement, and she helped her by giving her different options and what she could do. But one thing early on in the relationship really struck the mentor. The lady was OCD and cleaning her house. That was all she did when she had two young boys, and when they were at school, all she did was clean her house. And the reason for that was because at the school gate one day, somebody said to her, your children will be taken off you if you don't have a clean house. And that simple statement, really, she went crazy with the cleaning. So her mentor was able to put her straight with that and explain everything in detail. But she also then helped her out with lots of different things. She helped her out with budgeting and sorting out other things in her life. Her two sons, her youngest son has autism. So she was able to signpost her to the local YMCA, who has a special youth club just for children with autism. So both her and her other son then went to a different youth club in the YMCA. So the boys now have another life outside home and school and making new friends, and they're a lot happier, and she's a lot happier. And it's just absolutely fantastic the way things have happened for her. Her mentor also helped her with her CV, because that is actually part of what she does in her day job. So she was able to help her write up a CV, and she is now part-time employed in a local access to employment cafe. So when she started, she was just, behind the counter. She wouldn't talk to anybody. She wouldn't speak or anything. And now she's actually out serving tables. And this is all happening in the short space of time. In 10 weeks, it's amazing how much you can do. The lady concerned was just so, she just so wanted to change and make changes in her life, and for her children to be happier and for herself to be happier. And it's just amazing how much it has changed. Just somebody who listened to her and who helped her along the way and give her support and words of encouragement, and somebody just cheering her on. It just made such a difference in her life.